cool highlands of the Andes that reach north into both Colombia and Venezuela, the farmer's life is simple and hard. The old ways, the old tools have scarcely changed in 400 years when Spanish conquerors took this land and the people on it, dividing it among themselves into feudal estates. The grain is still harvested by hand. The yield is low, for much of this ancient land is no longer fertile. To separate the husk from the grain, the farmers make their horses trample on it. Then they winnow it by hand. They know of no other way. In some areas along the Caribbean coast, the people turn to fishing, particularly where the land is too arid for farming. Like the farmers, these coastal fishing folk have changed their ways little over the centuries. Here is a village marketplace. To barter and haggle over the price of a fresh fish or dish of maize is a daily ritual. With no refrigerators to protect perishables from the tropic heat, shoppers insist on freshness. The best way to keep chicken fresh is to buy it live. The old ways are slow to go in the marketplaces, in the villages, in the rural communities throughout these lands. And yet, as neighbors get together, you may hear them talk and wonder if perhaps there isn't a different way, a better way. In the cities of Colombia and Venezuela, a revolution is clearly apparent. In cities like Caracas, there are modern streets, factories, and skyscrapers. These republics are determined to bring about, in a few years, economic and social changes that took centuries to develop in the nations of Europe and North America. These neighboring republics of South America share much of the same geography and history. Colombia is larger, both in area and population, than Venezuela. Their combined land area is about 1/4 that of the United States. The population of Venezuela is only about 7 million people, that of New York City. Colombia's population is about 14 million. These nations have in common the main surface features of this part of the continent, as well as the Caribbean coastline. The Caribbean lowlands region was first to know the Spanish conqueror, the conquistador, who came seeking the legendary wealth of El Dorado. The old forts, like this one at Cartagena, were built to protect Spanish plunder from the raids of pirates. The Spaniards never found El Dorado, but they did find another kind of wealth, in the land. They established the large plantations, using both native Indians and African Negroes as slave labor. Slavery has gone, but sugar cane still flourishes in these humid tropical lowlands. It has long been the lowland's most valuable crop. Today, other tropical crops are also important. The main highways are still the rivers, like the Magdalena in Colombia. This is the route the conquistadores took as they pressed inland in search of El Dorado's gold. In the quiet villages along the way are some of their descendants. Many have intermarried with people of Indian and Negro origin. Most of the villagers work on the plantations, but here and there along the river you will find men panning for gold, still seeking El Dorado. In both Colombia and Venezuela, the Andes Mountains and their surrounding uplands extend north to the Caribbean coast, splitting into separate ranges. In Colombia, the western, central, and eastern Cordillera dominate the land, while the Cordillera de Mérida extends into Venezuela. Because of the temperate climate, more people live in the uplands than in the other parts of the two countries. Colombia and Venezuela share the problems of transportation imposed by geography. 4 centuries ago, when the Spaniards first traveled to the interior of Colombia, the journey was long and arduous. The roads are better now, but transportation is still difficult in many places. In the interior uplands and valleys, the land was the conqueror's greatest source of wealth. They divided the land into large estates and established many towns and villages. Here, in the cool basins of the eastern Cordillera, the conquistadores found many Indians whom they could use as laborers. For the past half-century, the principal crop of the central Cordillera region has been coffee, and coffee is still the largest export crop of both countries. In many parts of the coffee highlands, the land is divided into small farms, or fincas. Senor Hoffman, a German immigrant, is an independent coffee grower. Working with a few helpers and his family, Senor Hoffman harvests and dries the coffee beans on his own finca. Senor Hoffman is one of the many immigrants from Europe who have made their home in this part of Latin America. With their skills, their ideas, and their energy, they are enriching the life of their adopted country. As he spreads his coffee beans to dry in the sun, Senor Hoffman wonders what price they will bring on the market. His son Pepito was born here and thinks of himself as a Colombian. He's proud to help his father on the finca. Senor Hoffman's wife is part Indian, a woman wise in the ways of the country. Young Pepito is getting his schooling by way of radio. A special radio school teaches the children in remote regions to read and write. Senor Hoffman is happy that his son can get an education in this modern way. Senora Hoffman never had such an opportunity. She can neither read nor write, but she will learn with her children. If the coffee prices are good, Senor Hoffman will be able to send his sons to high school in town. All depends on coffee, he tells them. Indeed, in Colombia, almost everything depends on world prices of coffee. To the south, in the eastern Cordillera region, is Bogotá, Colombia's capital. Established over 4 centuries ago by the Spanish conquerors, many of its monuments and buildings were built in colonial days. There are many churches, for the Spaniards brought the Catholic faith to the New World. Colombians have always been a religious people. The quiet residential streets of colonial houses and tranquil gardens are reminders that Bogotá is also a city of a cultured aristocracy, established here under Spanish rule. Early in the 19th century, revolution shattered Bogotá's tranquility. Through the leadership of Simón Bolívar, Spanish rule was ended in South America. Yet the people saw no change, even then. With the support of the army and the great landowners, aristocratic rulers preserved the Spanish system that gave privilege to the few. Revolution, bloody civil war, and oppression have all occurred within a century. The people most affected have been the Indians and the mestizos. Mestizos are the people of mixed blood who form the largest group of laborers. The mestizos are also the knife sharpeners, the peddlers, the businessmen of the city. Mestizo boys often sell papers and run errands or shine shoes. For a century, the laboring classes have lived under the shadow of dictatorship and oppression. Only recently have they held any hope of change. Today, change is all around them. In Bogotá, bustling streets reveal that commerce and industry are developing quickly in Colombia. The Bogotá airport is headquarters for Colombia's extensive airline system, first in Latin America. The airplane, like the radio, now reaches the remotest regions in this part of South America. The large area that lies to the east of the mountain region is called the Llanos. This is a region of grassy plains and scrub woodland. Not many people live in the Llanos. European settlers have been discouraged by the drought, which burns the Llanos for half the year, and by the insects which are always there, plaguing man and beast. The few who live here are mostly nomadic Indians, but the region can be productive as cattle rangeland. Millions of cattle have been raised by the llaneros. Llaneros are Indian cowboys who work for the cattle barons. Each year, about April, they round up the cattle and drive them to high ground, for worse than the drought, they fear the rainy season that swells the streams and floods the villages and plains, making communication by road almost impossible. The Llanos are flooded by heavy rains from April to October each year. This simple cable car is one solution to the problem. But what the region really needs is a vast program of flood control and irrigation projects. Some are already underway, and more are being planned to make the region truly productive. Beneath the sometimes flooded, sometimes parched surface of the Llanos lies another source of wealth: oil. Farther north, tremendous reserves have already been developed by companies from North America and Europe in the Lake Maracaibo region. Both Colombia and Venezuela are rich in oil and natural gas. At present, Venezuela produces much more than Colombia. Here, a new class of trained industrial workers and technicians is being developed. The foreman, Senor Mendoza, belongs to this new class, a group unknown before in Colombia or Venezuela. Senor Mendoza's crew are all Venezuelans like himself. Their oil field is under the waters of Lake Maracaibo. To get to and from work, they must travel in the oil company's launch. Here, near the eastern shore of the lake, is the third largest oil field in the world. The flow of oil from the Lake Maracaibo field is an important source of tax revenue for the government of Venezuela. It is also helping to create a small but growing middle class. Senor Mendoza and his men work all year round, earning regular wages. A man like Senor Mendoza can afford adequate housing. His wife's labor-saving devices give her leisure, and she can feed her family well. Most important, Senor Mendoza has time to read and think about the development of his country. He is proud that his daughter Esperanza is doing well at the university. His sons go to school regularly. Pedro wants to be an oil company foreman like Papa. Emiliano wants to be an engineer in some faraway place. Venezuela and Colombia both will need engineers, for there are vast regions yet to be developed, particularly in the Guyana highlands to the south. This is a region of hilly upland, covered by thick forest in some parts and grassland in others. Some parts of the Guyana highlands have not yet been explored. Recently, high-grade iron ore was discovered here, a whole mountain of it, called the Cerro Bolivar, just on the edge of the Guyana highlands. To penetrate deeper into these highlands will require more costly roads and railroads. It will require a great deal of planning, but the resources are there. Much of the ore from the Cerro Bolivar is now shipped to mills in the United States, from loading points on the Orinoco River. But new steel mills have been built in both Colombia and Venezuela. These process nearby ores into steel for industry and construction. Skilled and trained industrial workers are increasing in number, from the highly specialized emerald cutters to the machine operators who work in the huge textile mills. Industrial cities are growing in both countries. In Caracas particularly, the many new buildings indicate the rapid economic development that is taking place. But here in their capital city, Venezuelans will also show you their university, for Latin Americans know that education and culture are important to the growth of a nation. Dr. Paris is a professor of economics at the university in Caracas. He represents a new group in Latin America, a group of educated professional people. Dr. Paris lives in one of the new apartment buildings with his small family. Like her husband, Senora Paris is concerned about the kind of country their children will grow up in. They take a lively interest in the political affairs of their country, for they want it to be a land where all children can share good health and the opportunities to become useful citizens. In Caracas, as in other cities of Colombia and Venezuela, Latin Americans are constantly confronted with change. They see in the new stores, factories, and expressways symbols of their country's leap into the industrial age. There are new jobs, and the farm laborers flock to the cities, abandoning the land they could never hope to own. But they can bring little to the cities, an animal to sell on the market perhaps, or handicrafts. Too often they do not have the skills needed by factories and offices, and they become jobless derelicts. In Caracas, the Venezuelan government is continually tearing down slums and moving the slum dwellers into new public housing. Yet just beyond the bold new apartments are still more shanties of the jobless. There are problems ahead here as elsewhere in Latin America. There is a great contrast between the very rich, with their splendid homes and high living standards, and the very poor, with their mud huts and meager diets. Yet more and more people can see the promise of a better way of life. More and more people are becoming impatient for a greater share of their nation's wealth, for education, for better opportunities. They will wait no longer. They are determined to realize their hopes. How will they do so? Will it be through desperate acts of violence? Or will it be through orderly democratic processes? The next few years will tell.